May 4, 1942. Over the endless expanse of the Coral Sea, a handful of American pilots climbed into battered F4F Wildcats. Their mission seemed impossible. Outnumbered, outgunned, and facing Japan's mightiest carriers, they were all that stood between a fleet and annihilation. Before the first bombs fell, they had only training, courage, and an unyielding will. And yet, their actions that day would shock an entire empire. If you want to uncover more untold stories of courage and resilience from World War II, subscribe now and join us as we explore the battles that shaped history. In early 1942, Japan's expansion across the Pacific seemed unstoppable. For carriers, dozens of cruisers, and hundreds of planes prowled the seas. Their eyes were set on Port Moresby and the Coral Sea, a critical gateway to Australia. The U.S. Navy had suffered grievous losses at Pearl Harbor just months earlier. Morale was low. Ships were being repaired. Pilots trained under the shadow of fear. Yet a single squadron, based on the tiny USS Lexington, was ordered into the abyss. Their task: stop the Japanese advance, no matter the cost. The morning sun had barely risen when radar picked up the Japanese strike force. Wildcats roared to life. Torpedo bombers lurched into formation. Each pilot knew the numbers. The enemy had 6 carriers, nearly 3 times their own strength. Yet irony lay in the skies. Japanese pilots underestimated the skill of the small U.S. squadron. Their confidence would become their undoing. Lieutenant Commander John Thach, architect of the Thach Weave, prepared his men. Strategy would be as lethal as weapons. In the next hours, courage and ingenuity would clash against sheer force. The battle erupted with terrifying ferocity. Japanese Zeros screamed through the sky. American Wildcats met them head-on. The tiny squadron's Wildcats twisted through impossible angles, escorting dive bombers toward enemy carriers. Torpedoes hissed through the air. Bombs rained down. Each hit was a statement. Numbers alone could not guarantee victory. On May 7th, the USS Lexington was hit and ablaze. Captain Frederick Sherman gave the order to abandon ship. Courage, however, did not leave the deck. Pilots flew until their wings were scorched. Men fought as though every second meant the survival of a continent. By the end of May 8th, the battle was over. The Japanese fleet, stunned by losses, retreated. The tiny U.S. squadron had achieved the impossible, stopping a massive assault that threatened Australia itself. The USS Lexington was lost, but the courage displayed would resonate across the Pacific. Pilots returned to the decks, older, wiser, haunted, yet unbroken. History remembered not just the numbers, but the resilience, strategy, and valor of those who refused to yield. In the vast theater of war, it was a small squadron that proved courage could bend destiny. One squadron had stopped an empire and in doing so inspired generations. Today, the story of that tiny carrier squadron endures. Lessons of ingenuity, bravery, and sacrifice are taught to every naval officer. The Pacific would witness many more battles, but the Coral Sea became a turning point, a moment when courage outweighed numbers and valor shaped history. Let us remember the pilots, sailors, and strategists who stood against overwhelming odds, whose actions echo across oceans and generations. Their legacy is a testament. Even the smallest force can change the course of a war. May 7, 1942. By mid-morning, the skies were a maelstrom. American Wildcats swooped in tight formations, executing the Thach Weave, forcing the Japanese Zeros into fatal miscalculations. Torpedo bombers, slowed by heavy payloads, pressed on despite concentrated flak. Every pilot faced the impossible. Turn too early, risk missing the target. Turn too late, risk destruction. Smoke and fire blurred the horizon. The roar of engines blended with the shriek of anti-aircraft fire. On the deck of the USS Yorktown, mechanics frantically reloaded aircraft. Pilots returned, their planes riddled with holes, yet the squadron kept pressing. Each sortie a gamble, each maneuver a life-or-death choice. Lieutenant Commander John Thach barking orders, eyes scanning the horizon, a mixture of calm precision and intense focus. For the Japanese, confidence turned to confusion. Ships that had once seemed invincible now listed from torpedo hits, smoke trailing into the sky. The smallest U.S. squadron had become the spearhead of resistance, an unlikely force shaping the course of the Pacific War. As the battle raged into its second day, Japanese commanders faced a grim reality. 2 carriers severely damaged, multiple aircraft lost, their supply lines threatened. The calculated advance toward Port Moresby was halted. Against all odds, a small American squadron had forced a strategic retreat. History would later call this the first naval engagement in which opposing fleets never sighted one another directly, a battle decided by carriers and air power alone. The Battle of the Coral Sea became more than a clash of metal and fire. It was a testament to adaptability, courage, and the human will to confront overwhelming odds. One tiny squadron had defied expectations, turning the tide of an entire campaign. Amid the chaos, individual stories emerged. Pilots who flew their Wildcats until engines failed. Sailors who abandoned ship under fire, dragging comrades through oil-slicked waters. Mechanics who rebuilt planes in hours, knowing every second could mean life or death. Lieutenant Commander Thach, architect of the defensive Thach Weave, witnessed his men's valor firsthand. Their courage wasn't just technical skill. It was resilience, ingenuity, and the refusal to surrender to fear. We knew the odds. Every sortie felt like the last. But something inside pushed us forward. We couldn't fail. Not for ourselves, not for those waiting in Australia, not for the world watching. The U.S. lost the USS Lexington, but the price of victory was far outweighed by the strategic gain. Japan's southward advance was stopped. Australia remained safe from immediate threat. The Pacific War had reached a pivotal moment, one in which American resolve proved equal to any empire. Coral Sea marked the first time in history that carrier-based aircraft alone determined the outcome of a naval battle. For historians, it was a revelation. For the men in the sky and on deck, it was survival and the triumph of courage over sheer numbers. Today, the heroism of that tiny carrier squadron endures. Lessons of strategy, ingenuity, and bravery guide naval doctrine. The Thach Weave is taught in every fighter pilot program. The story of men who faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious reminds us that courage is not measured by numbers, but by resolve. One small squadron stopped an empire. One squadron proved that valor and resilience can change the course of history. And though decades have passed, the echoes of that battle still resonate across oceans, reminding all who hear it that even in the darkest hours, human courage can shine brightest. For those who survived, the memories were vivid, unrelenting. Sailors spoke of the Lexington's deck engulfed in flames. Pilots recounted maneuvers executed in smoke and chaos. Every man carried the weight of decisions made in seconds, decisions that meant life or death. We were scared, but fear became fuel. Every plane that lifted off, every torpedo that found its mark. It was for each other, for our families, for the war effort. The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first engagement in history where opposing fleets fought entirely with aircraft. The tiny U.S. squadron's actions halted Japan's southern advance and preserved Australia as a vital Allied stronghold. Analysts later concluded, one squadron, by skill, strategy, and sheer determination, had changed the trajectory of the Pacific War. The cost was steep. USS Lexington was lost. Hundreds of planes destroyed. Many lives sacrificed. Yet these losses were tempered by the victory achieved. Courage had triumphed over overwhelming odds. A victory that would echo for decades. Today, the lessons of the Coral Sea are studied by every naval officer. The Thach Weave is taught in fighter programs worldwide. But more than tactics, the battle left a lesson in human resilience. Even a small, determined force can face an empire and emerge victorious. In the vast theater of the Pacific, one tiny squadron stopped an empire. Their planes no longer roar across the skies, but the echoes of courage remain. Coral Sea reminds us, even in the darkest hours, valor can bend the arc of history. One squadron, one fleet, one moment, forever etched in the story of World War II. If you were inspired by the courage and resilience of the Coral Sea pilots, don't forget to subscribe. Join us as we uncover more untold stories of World War II, stories of valor, sacrifice, and the moments that changed history.